Done. Well, for more, we're joined by Labor MP Nick Champion. Nick,
good morning.
Good morning to you. How do you reconcile this decision of allowing 1,700 foreign workers into the country when many other Australian workers are losing their jobs?
Well, look, obviously it's understandable that Australians should have some concerns and frustrations about this process, but what we have at the moment is an economy in transition. So we're losing jobs out of manufacturing predominantly in the southern part of the country, and meanwhile in the northern part of the country we have these massive resource projects, over $2 billion, which need to be developed and need need foreign labour, unfortunately, to be undertaken. And we have to be very careful here that we, if you like, don't cut off our nose to spite our face. Sure, there's 1,700 foreign workers coming in under this agreement, up to that many under this agreement, but 6,000 Australian jobs will be created because of it. So, we do have to be careful to see the whole picture here. Sure, there's up to 1,700 foreign workers under 457 visas, but there's 6,000 Australian jobs being created by this project as well.
What then do you make of union comments? So we've heard Paul Howes, obviously the AW National Secretary, saying it's bad news for Australian workers. In fact, he goes further. He says, I thought we were attacking these guys at the moment. Whose side are we on?
Well, look, I certainly understand unionists' frustration. I mean, they do have to deal with some very trying circumstances. Dealing with redundancies is not a fun job. I've done it myself. It tends to, your heart goes out to people when they lose their job, and we've got to do, as a government, everything we can to make sure those workers get the best chance to retrain and to reskill themselves for jobs that are opening up in the economy. But what we have to do is look at the national interest here, and we've got massive resources-based projects which are in remote Australia and which need electricians and boiler makers and the like to be actually facilitated. So it seems to me that in order to create 6,000 Australian jobs, we may need some foreign workers to do that. This is a sensible way of doing it. This agreement sets up a jobs board which says that you can only get a foreign work visa if that position has been advertised in Australia and no qualified Australian has applied to do it. So, there's safeguards in this agreement and there's jobs as a result of this agreement, and I guess I understand people's frustration, but I just caution people to have a look at the details of the agreement. And obviously, let's not cut off our nose to spite our face.
How can it be that the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, didn't find out about this decision? So she clearly wasn't involved in this decision-making process. She didn't find out until Wednesday.
Well, that's, I think, as a result of a newspaper report. I don't know if that's a fact or not. But this process went through Cabinet. It went through Cabinet and through caucus last year, in actual fact. It's fair to say that most of the caucus want Australians to be trained up and skilled first, and that's why in the previous budget, not this one, but in the previous budget, a whole lot of money was put into jobs and skills, and the Prime Minister's led the way in abolishing fees for TAFE courses and vocational education. I think the government's doing a lot in this picture, but we have to accept that in these massive projects, we just simply won't undertake them without both foreign capital and foreign labour. We'd prefer to do it with our own resources, but I think if it's a choice between having these massive resource projects or not having them, we've got to have them.
Nick Champion, you should not be surprised that this has again stirred the leadership pot as far as Julia Gillard is concerned. In fact, some conspiracy theorists would have it that the architects of this decision, being Chris Bowen and Martin Ferguson, are Kevin Rudd backers. You yourself were a Kevin Rudd backer. Those conspiracy theorists would say, well, this is all part of a plot to destabilise Julia Gillard.
Well, we had a caucus vote, and I accept the results of that caucus vote, absolutely. The ministers, I think, are motivated by the national interest, and while you know, the frustrations around this transition are understandable. It's a very trying circumstance when you've got Australians at one end of the country losing their jobs and these massive opportunities in the Pilbara and in the north of the country. So, you know, that's a big transition for an economy to make. It's very hard to ask workers who have lost their jobs in New South Wales or Victoria or Tasmania to up and move to West Australia.
But this is so much at odds with what the Treasurer Wayne Swan has been saying as far as protecting the interests of the very rich and their interests as far as mining is concerned. And at a time when the government is desperate for votes, particularly of the ordinary workers, what does this say to those workers?
Well, there's a lot in your question. Look, I think there's this transition underway, this big economic transition, and it's obviously causing a lot of debate in the community. But what we've got to do is continue to grow the economy, and our economy is 16% bigger than it was prior to the GFC, so we're one of the few industrialised economies in the world that have grown. But while we're growing, we've got to make sure we share that wealth as well. One of the ways you share that wealth is through jobs. Another way you share that wealth is through the mining tax. We want to get the balance right between growing the economy and undertaking this transition and making sure people get opportunities in it. And one of the ways we do that is by getting people jobs. One of the ways we do that is by getting people skills, and one of the ways we do that is by having the mining tax. That spreads the benefits of these massive projects throughout the community.